At 10:42 a.m. on December 1st, 1944, Lieutenant Alfred Rose climbed into the turret of an M36 Jackson tank destroyer dug in on high ground northeast of Beek, Germany. Cold metal pressed against his gloves as he settled into the gunner's seat, hands moving across controls he barely knew. 2 miles away, German armor was prowling the countryside. Rose was 26 years old. He had been with the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion for 3 weeks. He had 0 confirmed kills. Across the Rhineland, elements of the German 5th Panzer Army were counterattacking in force. At least 40 Panther tanks were operating in the sector, machines whose sloped frontal armor could shrug off American rounds fired from 800 yards. In November alone, Rose's battalion had lost 11 tank destroyers. 17 crewmen were dead. The pattern never changed. German gunners saw first. German gunners fired first. American crews died before they understood what had hit them. The M10 Wolverines the battalion had been using simply could not solve the Panther problem. Beyond 500 yards, their guns lacked the penetration to punch through German armor. By the time American crews closed the distance, German 88mm guns had already turned their vehicles into burning coffins. The Army's answer arrived in September. The M36 Jackson. Built on a Sherman chassis, it mounted the 90mm gun, the most powerful American tank gun in Europe. On paper, it could penetrate over 5 inches of armor at 1,500 yards. Theoretically, it could reach targets well beyond 2 miles. On paper, it was the solution. In reality, Rose had fired exactly 4 training rounds through the gun. He didn't know the reticle markings by memory. He didn't know the ranging system instinctively. He didn't know whether the telescopic sight had been field-modified in some undocumented way. His commander had given him one instruction: learn fast. The battalion was being repositioned to support Operation Clipper, the push to break through the Siegfried Line fortifications near Geilenkirchen. Intelligence reported German armor counterattacking across the sector. Panthers, Tigers, self-propelled guns, targets that demanded gunners who knew their weapons down to muscle memory. Rose did not. He studied the M36F telescopic sight mounted in front of him. The reticle was marked in clean, precise increments: 400 yards, 800, 1,200, stretching all the way out to a final marking, 4,600 yards. Maximum theoretical range, 2.5 miles. Rose had never heard of anyone engaging armor at that distance. Tank battles happened at 500 yards, maybe 1,000, if terrain allowed. Anything farther belonged to artillery, not tank destroyers. The Jackson's turret felt tight around him. Loader to his left, commander above and slightly behind. Driver and assistant driver sealed inside the hull below. Rose ran his hands over the traverse controls, the elevation wheel, the firing mechanism. Everything felt unfamiliar. 3 weeks was not enough time to develop the instincts that kept gunners alive. He needed months. He had hours. The high ground northeast of Beek offered sweeping visibility, open fields, thin tree lines, and a highway running parallel to their position. Perfect terrain for spotting targets. Perfect terrain for being spotted. German forward observers had been calling artillery onto exposed ridge lines all week. The battalion stayed dispersed, never clustering more than 2 vehicles together. Rose pressed his face against the rubber eyepiece. The optics were sharp, the magnification steady. He practiced tracking across the horizon, adjusting elevation, watching how the reticle moved with each small correction. The range markings slid past: 1, 200, 2, 000, 3, 000, all the way to that final, almost absurd number. At 11:15, movement flickered at the very edge of his sight picture. Dark, angular, slow. Something moving far beyond any range he'd ever been taught to engage. He steadied the sight and followed it. The shape resolved into the unmistakable silhouette of a German Panther tank. Low profile, long gun barrel, sloped armor catching the winter light. It was traveling left to right along a distant highway at perhaps 6 to 8 miles per hour. Rose's first instinct was to report the sighting and let someone else deal with it. The range had to be over 2 miles. Nobody shot tanks at 2 miles. Ballistic drop alone would send rounds burying into the earth or sailing uselessly overhead. Crosswind drift would push the shell yards off course. At that distance, a fraction of a degree meant a miss by dozens of meters. But the Panther wasn't zigzagging, wasn't halting, wasn't aware it was being watched. It moved in a straight line, exposed, unaware that an American gunner was tracking it from high ground 2.5 miles away. A target that appeared once in a war, if you were unlucky enough to be the one facing it. Rose checked the reticle again. The M36F sight hadn't been designed casually. Its markings were calculated for the 90mm gun, muzzle velocity, ballistic coefficient, standardized ammunition. The engineers who designed it believed the gun could reach that far. Whether it could hit anything was another matter. Rose's mind began working through the problem. The Panther was moving perpendicular to his position. He would need to lead the target by dozens of yards. At that range, the round would take several seconds to arrive. During that time, the tank would continue moving. Exact calculations required precise range, target speed, wind conditions, and flight time. He had none of those with certainty. The Jackson carried two main types of ammunition. The M82 armor-piercing capped round was loaded, standard practice in combat zones. At 500 yards, it could penetrate over 5 inches of armor. At 1,000 yards, nearly 5. At 4,600 yards, the penetration tables simply stopped. No one was expected to try. Rose knew the physics. Velocity bled away with every yard. Penetration dropped accordingly. Even a direct hit might fail against frontal armor. But the Panther's side armor was thinner, 40 to 50 millimeters. Vulnerable, even at extreme range. The tank continued its steady movement along the distant road. Rose made a decision that violated everything he had been taught about tank destroyer doctrine. He was going to take the shot, not because he was confident it would work, but because this was the only way to find out whether the M36 Jackson could actually do what the engineers claimed. His hand tightened on the traverse control. He began tracking the Panther smoothly, keeping it centered in the reticle as calculations raced through his head. Panther, Rose said calmly into the intercom. Extreme range. Lateral movement. The commander climbed up beside him and checked through his own optics. He watched in silence for several seconds. Then he spoke. Rose's call. Rose's shot. The loader already had the M82 seated in the breech. Rose focused on the ranging problem. The sight showed distances, but estimating range to a moving target at 2.5 miles was guesswork. He would need to bracket the target, short, then long, walking the fire onto it. Ranging fire was artillery doctrine. For a tank destroyer at close range, it was suicide. At this distance, the Panther crew wouldn't hear the shot, wouldn't see the muzzle flash, wouldn't know they were being targeted until impacts began landing nearby. Rose set the elevation for what he estimated was 4,000 yards, short of the target. He wanted to see where the round fell. He tracked the Panther's steady movement and prepared to fire. Rose led the target by roughly 50 yards, his best estimate of how far the Panther would travel during the shell's flight time. He pressed the firing trigger. The 90mm gun slammed backward in recoil, rocking the entire turret. Even with the new double-baffle muzzle brake installed in November, the blast was violent. Smoke and dust swallowed the sight picture for 2 full seconds. Rose stayed glued to the eyepiece. At 4,000 yards, time of flight was just over 6 seconds. He counted silently. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nothing. At that distance, the impact itself was invisible through the telescopic sight. No splash of earth, no clear strike, just empty road and a Panther still moving steadily along the highway, unaware that someone had just fired a round at it from more than 2 miles away. Rose needed data. He elevated the gun slightly, adding another 100 yards to his estimate. The Panther kept rolling, unchanged in speed or direction. No evasive movement. No halt. No smoke. No sign the crew had heard or seen anything. He adjusted his lead to 60 yards to account for the longer flight time. Up, he said quietly. Second shot. The gun recoiled again. Smoke. Dust. Rose never took his eye off the optic. At this range, the shell would take closer to 7 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then he saw it. A small burst of dust on the highway, 20 yards short of the Panther's position. Close. Very close. Close enough that Rose finally had something solid. The first round had gone short. The second had gone slightly short and right, but near enough to bracket the target. He now knew the range within a narrow margin. He made one final correction. Elevation up. lead adjusted, another 10 yards forward to account for continued movement. He slid the reticle to the last marking. 4,600 yards. The maximum range etched into the M36F sight. Rose waited. He tracked the Panther smoothly, letting it move into the exact point where his calculations said steel and steel would meet. When it reached that point, he fired. The third round left the muzzle at roughly 2,700 feet per second. By the time it crossed 4,600 yards of open countryside, its velocity had dropped sharply, but physics still favored Rose in one crucial way. The Panther's side armor was only 40 to 50 millimeters thick. Even a slowed 90 millimeters projectile still carried enough energy to punch through it. Through the scope, Rose saw the hit as a bright, sharp flash on the Panther's left side hull, just behind the front road wheel. Exactly where he'd aimed. A split second later, a much larger secondary explosion tore through the tank. The Panther lurched, ground to a stop, and began vomiting smoke from its turret hatches. Its ammunition, 79 rounds of 75 millimeter shells, was detonating inside the fighting compartment. That hit location was catastrophic. The loader would have been killed instantly. The pressure wave would have crushed lungs, ruptured eardrums, shattered ribs. Even if anyone survived the first explosion, they had seconds, at most, before fire reached the fuel tanks. Rose did not stop firing. In tank destroyer doctrine, a stopped tank was not a dead tank. German crews were trained to feign destruction, wait for American units to pass, then restart and strike from behind. Rose had heard the stories. Panthers that came back to life half an hour later. He loaded another M82 armor-piercing round. Fourth shot. Same point of aim. The shell punched into the hull near the original penetration, feeding the internal fire. For the fifth shot, Rose switched ammunition. High explosive. The He round detonated against the hull, ripping away external fittings and ensuring the fire inside would spread uncontrollably. Flames began licking out of vision ports. Sixth round. Seventh. Rose kept firing until fire was visibly pouring from every hatch and seam. Thick black diesel smoke rising straight into the winter sky. There was no doubt now. That Panther was finished. From first trigger pull to confirmed destruction, the engagement had lasted just over 2 minutes. Rose had fired 7 rounds, 2 for ranging, 1 decisive kill shot, 4 to make certain. The range was 4,600 yards, 2.61 miles. The maximum effective distance marked on the M36F sight. When Rose finally pulled back from the eyepiece, his hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the delayed realization of what he had just done. He had destroyed a Panther tank at a distance that exceeded every armored engagement he had ever heard of. His commander and crew had watched it happen. The coordinates, timeline, and sight line would all match. The kill would go into the battalion's after-action report as verified. What Rose did not know was that this shot, at 4,600 yards, would stand as the second longest confirmed tank-on-tank kill in history for the next 47 years. Only a British Challenger crew, firing in the Iraqi desert in 1991, would ever exceed it. The burning wreck remained visible on the distant highway for nearly half an hour. Units across the sector reported the smoke column, unsure whether it marked a destroyed German vehicle or an American position under fire. By early afternoon, the operations officer confirmed it. Rose's firing position on the high ground northeast of Beek aligned perfectly with the wreck. By 1300 hours, word had spread through the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion. A lieutenant nobody had known 3 weeks earlier had just proven what the M36 Jackson and its 90mm gun could really do. Other crews started asking questions. What range marking? How much lead? How many ranging shots? Rose didn't have clean answers. He hadn't followed a formula. He had followed physics, observation, and instinct. The M36 had only been in combat for 4 months. Before that, American tank destroyers fought with underpowered 3-inch guns that left crews outmatched against Panthers and Tigers. The 90mm gun changed the equation. Adapted from anti-aircraft artillery, designed to hit bombers at 15,000 feet, it gave American forces something they hadn't had before: reach. The Army had suspected it. Rose had proven it. The final range marking on the M76F sight wasn't optimistic. It was real. German forces in the sector continued operating Panther tanks throughout December, but nothing like December 1st ever happened again. Rose's battalion encountered Panthers regularly during the push toward the Roer River, but German crews were no longer careless. 2 years of fighting on the Eastern Front had taught them survival. They used terrain. They avoided open roads. They kept hull-down positions behind tree lines, villages, and ridge lines where American forces were forced to close to within 500 yards to get a clean shot. The conditions that made Rose's 4,600-yard engagement possible were never repeated. High ground with unobstructed sight lines. Open terrain with no concealment. A Panther moving steadily along an exposed highway. And a gunner willing to try something doctrine said could not work. By mid-December, the German counteroffensive in the Ardennes pulled most American armored units out of the Ruhr sector. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion was ordered south to meet the crisis. Rose would fire his M36's 90mm gun many more times before the war ended, but he would never again attempt a shot beyond normal combat range. 16 days after his record engagement, the Battle of the Bulge began. On December 16, 1944, 3 German armies surged out of the Ardennes forest, 200,000 troops, 600 tanks, including Panthers and the new King Tigers. American forces were caught completely off guard. Within 48 hours, German spearheads had punched more than 30 miles into Allied lines. On December 18th, the 814th received emergency orders. Redeploy immediately. Support the 7th Armored Division at St. Vith. If the Germans captured the town, they would control the road network leading to the Meuse River. The northern shoulder of the American front would collapse. Rose's company moved at night through Belgium. The roads were chaos, supply trucks fleeing west, infantry scrambling for defensive positions, artillery batteries moving under fire. By December 19th, the battalion was in contact. The fighting around St. Vith bore no resemblance to Beek. This was close-quarters armored warfare. Panthers bursting from tree lines at 300 yards. Tank destroyers firing from behind burning houses. German infantry with Panzerfausts hunting M36s through village streets. Here, the side that spotted first lived. Hesitation measured in seconds meant death. Rose's Jackson took position on the southern edge of town on December 20th, covering a key road junction. Engagement range, 800 yards. Normal combat distance. No exotic calculations, just point the gun at center mass and fire. The German attack came at dawn on December 21st. For Panthers supported by 2 companies of Panzer Grenadiers. Rose's company destroyed 2 Panthers in the first minute. German return fire knocked out 1 M36 and damaged 2 more. The fight lasted 14 minutes. When it ended, all 4 German tanks were burning and the infantry had withdrawn. American losses were severe. 3 tank destroyers destroyed, 11 crewmen killed or wounded. Rose survived St. Vith. His Jackson was hit twice by German 75mm rounds, both deflected by the sloped glassy plate. At combat angles, the armor was effectively over 140mm thick. German guns struggled to penetrate it beyond 600 yards. But the open-top turret was vulnerable. Several M36s in the battalion were knocked out by artillery airbursts during the week-long defense. By December 23rd, American forces were forced to abandon St. Vith. German pressure was overwhelming. The 7th Armored Division conducted a fighting withdrawal west, with the 814th providing rearguard fire at every defensible position. Rose fired his 90mm gun 43 times during the retreat. Every shot under 1,000 yards. Every target firing back. The contrast with December 1st was absolute. At Beek, Rose had time to range, calculate, and stalk a target that never knew it was being hunted. At St. Vith and during the withdrawal, combat happened at reflex speed. See target. Identify silhouette. Fire. No ranging shots. No careful math. Just the brutal arithmetic of kill or be killed. Rose never forgot the Panther burning on that distant highway. But the shots that kept him alive during the Bulge were the ones fired at point-blank range against tanks that could kill him just as easily. January 1945 was spent rebuilding. The battalion had lost 19 M36 Jacksons during the German offensive. 26 crewmen were dead. 41 were wounded. Replacement vehicles arrived from depots in France. Replacement crews came straight from training camps in the United States. Many had never fired a 90mm gun in combat. Rose found himself teaching them how to read the M36 sight, how to estimate range under stress, how to lead a moving target that was trying to kill you. They asked about the 4,600-yard shot. Rose told them to forget it. That happens once in a war, he said. What keeps you alive is killing Panthers at 500 yards. By February, the battalion was back in action, pushing toward the Rhine. German resistance was collapsing, but Panthers and King Tigers still appeared wherever the Wehrmacht tried to hold ground. The M36 Jackson remained the most effective American answer to German heavy armor. In March, Rose supported the Rhine crossings with 9th Army near Wesel. His company destroyed 6 Panthers and 2 King Tigers, every kill under 800 yards. April brought the final drive into Germany's industrial heartland. Most German armor was now abandoned or burning for lack of fuel. Rose saw his final combat on April 23 near the Elbe River. A single Panther emerged from a farm complex at 600 yards, attempting to retreat east. Rose fired 2 rounds. 2 hits. The Panther burned. It was his 47th confirmed kill. 46 of those kills were made under 1,000 yards. Germany surrendered on May 8. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion prepared for redeployment to the Pacific to fight Japanese armor in an invasion that never came. The atomic bombs ended the war before Rose ever fired another shot. The December 1st after-action report remained in the battalion files. Lieutenant Alfred Rose, M36 Jackson, Panther destroyed at 4,600 yards. Witnessed and verified. The shot appeared in Army publications for decades. Historians cited it. Gunnery instructors used it to show what was theoretically possible. But its true importance was not the distance. It was what it revealed. The M36 Jackson was not just a stopgap. It was the culmination of American tank destroyer doctrine, a weapon that finally allowed U.S. crews to meet German armor on equal terms. And sometimes, in the right hands, it could do something no one thought possible. The M36 Jackson was a vehicle doctrine had never truly planned for. It was supposed to fight at 500 yards, maybe 1,000 under ideal conditions. It was designed to ambush, relocate, and survive, not to conduct precision fire at distances normally reserved for artillery. Rose's shot on December 1, 1944 shattered that assumption. At 4,600 yards, the M36 proved it could engage and destroy the most heavily armored German tanks at the absolute limits of its design. Not in a test range, not in training. In combat, against a moving target, under battlefield conditions. For the next 47 years, that shot stood as the second longest confirmed tank-versus-tank kill in military history. Through Korea, through Vietnam, through the entire Cold War, American armored forces received better guns, better ammunition, stabilized platforms, and eventually digital fire control, but no U.S. tank crew ever documented a longer confirmed kill than Rose's. The record finally fell on February 26, 1991. During Operation Desert Storm, a British Challenger 1 tank, call sign 11B, engaged an Iraqi tank at extreme range in the open desert of southern Iraq. The gunner fired a depleted uranium sabot round using systems Rose could not have imagined in 1944. Laser rangefinders, thermal imaging, ballistic computers that calculated lead, elevation, wind, barrel wear, and ammunition temperature automatically. The round struck its target at 5,100 yards, 3.1 miles, the longest confirmed tank kill in history. Rose's shot dropped to second place. But context matters. The Challenger crew had technology refined over half a century. Rose had mechanical traverse wheels, an optical sight, and 3 weeks on a weapon system he barely knew. No laser, no computer, no stabilization, just physics, ranging shots, and judgment. He fired at a moving target beyond what doctrine said was possible, and made it work. The M36 Jackson remained in American service through the Korean War, where its 90mm gun proved more than capable against North Korean and Chinese armor. But terrain in Korea limited engagement ranges. Mountains, valleys, and poor sight lines meant most tank fights occurred under 500 yards. No one repeated Rose's engagement. The conditions never aligned again. Rose survived the war. He left active duty in 1946 and returned to civilian life. The Army offered him positions as a gunnery instructor at Fort Knox. He declined. He had spent 3 years shooting at people. He was finished. The records show he never spoke publicly about December 1st, 1944. No interviews. No memoirs. No lectures. He did not try to turn the shot into a legend. The after-action reports remained buried in archives. Decades later, military historians rediscovered them while researching tank destroyer operations in Northwest Europe. The engagement appeared in academic studies of armored warfare, cited as a rare example of direct fire engagement pushed to its absolute physical limit. Not a trick, not luck, not a fluke. A demonstration of what Second World War-era weapons could do under perfect conditions, and what a single gunner could accomplish when he trusted physics more than doctrine. At 4,600 yards, Alfred Rose proved that the limits of armored warfare were farther away than anyone in 1944 believed.